This was received in our regular email, and we posted it earlier. Now, for those of you that missed it, here is a verbal rendition. Unfortunately, its author is unknown, but having ourselves been born in the 1940s, it does bring back memories. To those of us born in the 30s and 40s, it is a visit to our past, before the hurly-burly of life in the 21st century. And to those of you who came after the mid-40s, it will tell you something about the years in which your parents and/or grandparents grew up. It's not original to us, and its author is unknown, but we think you might enjoy listening to it. It is called The Last Ones, a short memoir. Born in the 1930s and early 40s, we exist as a very special age cohort. We are the last ones. We are the last climbing out of the Depression, who can remember the winds of war and the war itself with fathers and uncles going off. We are the last to remember ration books for everything from sugar to shoes to stoves. We saved tinfoil and poured fat into tin cans. We saw cars up on blocks because tires weren't available. We saw mothers delivering milk in a horse-drawn cart. We are the last to hear Roosevelt's radio assurances and to see gold stars in the front windows of our grieving neighbors. We can also remember the parades on August 15, 1945, VJ Day. We saw the boys home from the war build their Cape Cod-style houses, pouring the cellar, tar papering it over, and living there until they could afford the time and money to build it out. We are the last who spent childhood without television, instead imagining what we heard on the radio. And we all like to brag with no TV. We spent our childhood playing outside until the streetlights came on. We did play outside, and we did play on our own. There was no Little League. The lack of television in our early years meant for most of us that we had little real understanding of what the world was like. Our Saturday afternoons, if at the movies, gave us newsreels of the war and the Holocaust sandwiched in between westerns and cartoons. Newspapers and magazines were written for adults. We were the last who had to find out for ourselves. As we grew up, the country was exploding with growth. The GI Bill gave returning veterans the means to get an education and spurred colleges to grow. VA loans fanned a housing boom. Pent-up demand coupled with new installment payment plans put factories to work. New highways would bring jobs and mobility. The veterans joined civic clubs and became active in politics. In the early 1940s and early 50s, the country seemed to lie in the embrace of brisk but quiet order as it gave birth to its new middle class. Our parents understandably became absorbed with their own new lives. They were free from the confines of the Depression and the war. They threw themselves into exploring opportunities they had never imagined. We weren't neglected, but we weren't today's all-consuming family focus. They were glad we played by ourselves until the street lights came on. They were busy discovering the post-war world. Most of us had no life plan, but with the unexpected virtue of ignorance and an economic rising tide, we simply stepped into the world and went to find out. We entered a world of overflowing plenty and opportunity, a world where we were welcomed. Based on our naive belief that there was more where this came from, we shaped life as we went. We enjoyed a luxury. We felt secure in our future. Of course, just as today, not all Americans shared in this experience. Depression, poverty was deep-rooted. Polio was still a crippler. The Korean War was a dark presage in the early 50s, and by mid-decade, school children were ducking under desks. China became Red China. Eisenhower sent the first advisors to Vietnam. Castro set up camp in Cuba, and Khrushchev came to power. We were the last to experience an interlude when there was no existential threats to our homeland. We came of age in the late 40s and early 50s. The war was over, and the Cold War, terrorism, climate change, technological upheaval, and perpetual economic insecurity had yet to haunt life with insistent unease. Only we can remember both a time of apocalyptic war and a time when our world was secure and full of bright promise and plenty. We experienced both. We grew up in the best possible time, a time when the world was getting better, not worse. We are truly the last ones. This is Homer Scarborough for Georgia News Online.